The MrExcel Podcast is sponsored by the Power Excel Seminar coming to Miami, Florida, and Montgomery, Alabama. Learn Excel from MrExcel Podcast, episode 1930. Show 120 years in a win-loss Sparkline. Hey, welcome back to the MrExcel Netcast. I'm Bill Jelen. Today, I'm making up for yesterday on October 16th. I was doing a seminar for the PASS group, a webinar, and at the end I showed this great little example, and right in the middle, about a few minutes in, I built an index formula with the wrong number of dollar signs, and everything just didn't work at that point. We were running out of time, so I'm making up for it today. I'm showing that trick. Again, what I have here is I have 120 years worth of Billboard Hot 100 data going back to 1890. I want to create a nice visualization based on a pivot table, but then what we're going to present is not the pivot table at all. We're going to present a Sparkline, a win-loss Sparkline, one of those new features was introduced in Excel 2010. Now, the first thing I have to do, I do have this data in Power Pivot, but first I need to create a lookup table that's going to be used for the win-loss Sparkline, and that's just going to be a table that is going to be created with a pivot table, but then it doesn't need to stay a pivot table. So in this particular case, I'm not going to use Power Pivot. I'm just going to create a regular old pivot table. Click OK. I want to put artist down the left-hand side, and then going across the top, I want to have the years and then the number of weeks that artist had a song on the chart. And if they had 2 or 3 songs on the chart, it would be cumulative. So, if there was a song that was on the chart for all 52 weeks and then a second song that was on the chart for 10 weeks, that would be 62. All right, so as we look here, it doesn't look like there's anything over in our pivot table. 38 Special, of course, had no hits back in the 1890s, nor neither did 10,000 Maniacs. You would have to scroll way to the right in order to see those start to come up with data, but there is data there. And then we also have all of these blank cells, and I usually make fun of Excel and the blank cells because I would prefer to have zeros there. Why don't they just put zeros there? But in this particular case, it's actually nice that we have to go into pivot table options and specify a 0 because the win-loss Sparkline shows the up marker for positive numbers and it needs a negative number to show the down marker. So this actually works out really, really well. I'm going to put a -1 in there for empty cells. And the beautiful thing about that setting is it's just displaying a -1. They're not adding into the totals. So you can imagine, let's say there was a one-hit wonder who was on the chart for 20 weeks in 1980, and then we have 119 other years where they weren't on the chart. That's 119 -1s and 120. The total of that's still going to be 20. Those -1s that are showing up are not actually being added into the total. All right, so there's our lookup table. It's 120 columns wide. And again, I don't need this to stay as a pivot table, so I'm simply going to copy and paste as values. And now we use that pivot table as a means to an end. Most of the time when I'm creating pivot tables, it's just a way to get a result. And now I have that result. I no longer need this to stay as a pivot table. I can simply just leave it here as a lookup table. All right, so now let's go into Power Pivot, where I have the same data. And in this case, I only have 2 tables. The original data actually had 5 tables. It was a lot larger. I was worried during the webinar that this old laptop that I use would start to strain under all of the records. So I tried to simplify the data set down so that way we wouldn't have the webinar audio start to go bad when the computer was giving so many CPUs to Power Pivot. So from here, we're going to create a pivot table. It's okay to go on a new worksheet. Click OK. And again, we want to have artists going down the left-hand side and the number of weeks. Now, what I want to show here is I want to show the top 10 artists for any particular decade. Boy, I hate this word row labels here. I'm going to go back to the Design tab and change that to tabular form. That way I get an actual heading. All right, and then we'll make it a little bit less narrow. We will analyze Insert Slicer. By the way, if you're in Excel 2010, it's called Options Analyze Slicer. Or Insert Slicer, and it'll be based on decade. All right, all new slicers appear in the middle of the screen. Isn't that annoying? They keep changing the column lists. There's a setting to turn that off. I'm going to right-click the pivot table options, and uncheck Auto Fit Column Lists on Update. Now I can make this however wide I want it to be, and it will stay that wide. All right, so our slicer shows up here. It's always a vertical slicer. I can make that a little bit better. Choose the slicer. Let's go with 7 columns and resize like that. All right, so now it's nice and small. Choose some color. All right, good. All right. So this is a list of all of the artists alphabetically. I want to see the top artists at the top. Yes, we could go into this drop down, more sort options. Say they want to sort descending based on sum of weeks, but starting in Excel 2010, when you just come here and sort the data, when I click Z to A, that used to do a one-time sort back in Excel 2003, but now when you do that, it automatically goes in and sets up the rule that I just talked about. So it goes into more sort options. It chooses descending. It chooses sum of weeks. But a great shortcut key just to, with a single click of the Z to A button to set up that rule. Now, here's how this is going to work. Right now, it's showing us all artists from high to low. And you can see if I choose people, the 1950s, you're seeing older acts, Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, 1960s, the Beatles, 1970s, Elton John, Elvis Presley. Where's Michael Jackson? He should show up there pretty soon. There we go. Elton John. And you can even choose a couple of decades. So if I want to see everything from like the 1970s to the 1990s, you'll get the total of those three. All right. Now, I don't need to show the whole list. I want to show just the top 10. So we're going to go to more sort options. So we're going to go to value filters and the top 10 filter and say top 10 items. This is, by the way, a very amazing dialog box. You can do top or bottom. You can ask for the top 80%, enough to get you 5,000 chart weeks. In this case, top 10, all the defaults there are perfect. All right, so there is my list of the top 10. All right, even this is a cool chart, but I promised you a win-loss sparkline, and so that's what we're going to do. And the win-loss sparkline, I don't want to just show that decade. I want to show all years. That way we can see who really had staying power. Who were the artists who got on the chart? They were in the top 10 in that decade, but then managed to stay on the chart for years or decades after that. And so while this pivot table is going to continue to live down here, I'm actually going to build the actual presentation layer way up above this area. So I'm going to insert a bunch of rows. I'm going to do Alt-IR there, and we'll create a nice little heading up here. So this is staying power of top artists in the Billboard Hot 100. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to have a column for artist. And then here in column B is going to be where the actual win-loss sparkline is going to go. Now out to the right, we're going to have all those years from 1890 going on out. So we'll do equal 1890 plus 1. I need to copy that out. I think I have 122 years worth of data. So I'm going to do Ctrl+C and just hold down the Shift key and start to hold down the right arrow. And I'm watching. You see that tooltip along the right-hand side? I'm watching until that gets up to, I think it's 121. Ctrl+V. All right. There we go. We actually have one more year than that. We end in 2012. So there is the list of all of the years for the Billboard data that I happen to have. Now, how are we going to figure out whether or not that particular artist is on the chart? Well, first thing, let's pull the artist data up into our report. So just a simple little formula there. And did I get 10? Springfield, perfect. All right. How are we going to do this? Well, one very slow way to do it would be to do a VLOOKUP, right? And this is the classic use for VLOOKUP. But VLOOKUP is a very expensive argument. And you can imagine we're going to have 122 VLOOKUPs going across times 10 rows. So 1,220 VLOOKUPs looking into thousands of rows of data. That is just going to calculate way, way too slow. So instead of using VLOOKUP, I'm going to use something called index and match. First, the match, and this is where we're going to have a column called where, and it says where is that artist in the list. So equal match. Go find Prince, comma, in our lookup table. See, I'm going to start here in cell A2. Go down, and I'm going to press F4 to put all of the dollar signs in, comma 0. 0 says we want an exact match, and so Prince is on row 6,578. Copy that down. All right, so now for every single artist, we're going to see where that person is located. And these are just as slow as a VLOOKUP would be. But you see, I only have 10 of these instead of 1,220 of those. All right, so a huge time saver to use one match. What we're going to use here instead of the VLOOKUP is a very fast function called index. And I'm going to be very careful when I build this because I need to make sure that I get the dollar signs exactly right. All right, so we get to specify an array and then the row number within the array. Well, the row number within the array is that value that's stored here in column F. All right, but I need to lock that down to always point to column F. So right here, I'm going to press F4, not once, not twice, but three times to lock it down to column F. All right, so that way as I copy this across, if I'm over here in column L, it's still going to reach back to column F. But the no dollar sign before the 4 is going to allow it to look in row 5, row 6, row 7 as I copy down. All right, and then the other part, the array. We need to get just the data for the 1890s. And I was careful here in the match to start in row 2. So I'm going to do the same thing here. We're going to go to the 1890 data and start in row 2 like that. And I'll press Ctrl+Shift+Down arrow to select the whole range, so B2 to B86667. What do we want to freeze here? Well, if I pressed F4 once, it would freeze everything, the column and the row. And I need this to be able to move across the column, so I press F4 one more time. So 2 F4s freezes just the row, 2 to 8667, but not the column. All right, so this is a great little formula here in that it's mixing both a reference that's freezing the rows and a reference that's freezing the columns. All right, so we'll copy that. I'm going to ride the range here, Control right arrow, go down, Control Shift left, and Control V, so that copied that all the way across. And I need to copy down 10 rows, so I just double click and it looks to the left. All right, so what we should have is a whole bunch of negative ones, but then out here in the modern era, we have some positive numbers. And that's the beautiful thing about the win-loss Sparkline. It doesn't care what the positive number is. Any positive number gets the up marker. Any negative number gets the down marker. All right, so we'll select our data and scroll back to the right under Insert, the win-loss. We want the location to be these 10 cells right there. Click OK. All right, so that's what we get. A Sparkline, as Professor Tufte defined it, is a word-sized chart. A word-sized chart, that's interesting. Word-sized chart, but sometimes, especially when we're trying to show 120 years worth of data, I don't think that it's better to be small. I mean, certainly if I made this column even smaller, it's going to be really hard to tell what's going on there. All right, so I'm actually a proponent here of making that really, really large, like that. Okay, so now we can actually, start to see all of the various artists. Now I need to find my slicer, which is going to be down here and over here. We'll take that slicer and drag it up. Just have to get near the edge of the Excel spreadsheet and it will scroll for you. So these are the artists who were the top in 1980. Let's go to 1940. All right, there we go. Got a bunch of people that my dad would have listened to. It's funny, my dad is 92. And when we're in the car, it's 40s on 4. So I'm actually probably as familiar with all of these because of the constant playing of Sirius 40s on 4 as I am familiar with these that I grew up with. All right, so there's our win-loss Sparkline. Now, I'm also a fan of taking Sparklines beyond what Microsoft would do. I like to label my Sparklines. I like to add more information in there. And so this next part, I admit, is rather tedious, but I think it really adds a lot to the whole meaning of the Sparkline. And I'm going to come out here to these beautiful formulas that I have, and I'm going to replace the formulas in the last row. I want to put a formula here that lets me see when we are at the start of a decade. All right, so in other words, is that year up there in row 3, is it evenly divisible by 10? So equal the mod of that year, comma 10, is that equal to 0? And what we're going to see is trues or falses. I actually need it to be ones or zeros. I'm going to take that whole thing, put it in parentheses, and multiply it by 1, which converts the trues to ones and the falses to zeros. I'm going to copy that across. Now this is my great little trick here, because when I come back into the Sparkline, you'll see that I have a marker that shows me the start position of every single decade. All right, and I use that as I'm creating my labels and lines. So here on the Insert tab, all kinds of different shapes that we can use It's amazing, but I just want a simple little line here. So we'll choose the line, and I'm going to draw a line right here at the start of the 1900s. All right, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key. That forces the line to be drawn straight in. I'm going to go one line above because I'm going to have labels up there in row 3. All right, so there's my line. For whatever reason, the lines always start out as blue. They don't have to be blue. I'm going to go to black. I'm also going to go to Shape Outline and add some dashes in there. Dashes. All right, so now we have our dash line at the start of the 1900s. Now that I have that line in, and it's drawn perfectly straight, it has the dashes, I'm just going to copy that. So I'm holding down the Control key, and dragging to the right. Actually, I'm going to hold down Control and Shift. Control and Shift will make sure that it doesn't go up or down. And drop it right at the beginning of the next decade. Actually, as I start to look at this, I'm going to have to increase the zoom a little bit and get it positioned correctly. All right, I'm going to keep doing that, but I'm going to pause the video. No reason to make you sit here and watch me these various items as I create the decade lines. All right, there we go. The lines are drawn in. Now we need to add some labels. For labels, we could either type the labels up here in row 1, but unfortunately it's all one cell. I could have gone with merge cells here and used 11 different columns and tried to get everything lined up. I could switch this to Courier New, which is the one monospace font that's on every computer, and try and type everything in the right way. But instead, I'm going to just fall back again here to the drawing toolbar and the text boxes. So we'll very carefully draw a text box in here above the 1890s. I want to make sure that a text box doesn't go on top of the dashed line because it would cover it up. So we'll put 1890s. We need to make that font centered and probably a little bit smaller. In some cases, you're going to need to go smaller than what they offer. So even though this drop down usually only goes down to 8, you're allowed to use this less than icon to make things really small. Although that's probably too small. So right there, we'll go with 8 point. I wonder how it will look with bold. There we go. All right, so we have the first one in. And I want to be careful here that it doesn't touch the edge of the cell. All right, now that I have that one in, again, it's just Control, drag to make copies, and then edit. And again, make sure that we can still see the dashed line behind. Do we need outlines there? No, I guess we don't. I should have done that before I made a copy. So Shape Outline, no outline, Shape Fill, no fill. And that way, even if it does happen to copy over. All right, so you get the general idea there. I'm going to keep making copies of this. We'll pause the video. All right, see, and then once I have those lines and labels in, then this temporary thing down here, I'm going to go Control Right, select the formulas just above, Control C, come down, Control V, and so that was just a temporary thing to provide nice guides to get those lines in. All right, a few more things to change the Sparkline color. We go to Sparkline Tools. The regular color is just for the up, so that changes all the black things. And then to change the negative points, we'll go with like a nice gray there. The headline or the title, we'll use cell styles and go with title for that. And let's see how it works. So we can go, let's say 1950, and you see who the top 10 artists were. Elvis Presley first debuted in, it looks like 1956, and then was on the chart almost every year up until about 1983. Had a comeback there in 2004. And it would be even more interesting to add another slicer for years. So within 1950, let's narrow it down to the 1951 or something like that. So I go back to the pivot table, insert slicer, and I'm going to use, see there's a year there in my fact table and there's a year there in my lookup table. I'm going to use the one in my lookup table because there's less records here. The slicer will actually be a little bit faster. And again, let's change that to be 10 columns, see if we can get it to fit straight across. Maybe 10 columns, there we go. And in theory, as we choose a decade, each one of these years will only be, there will only be 10 of them, so that should work well. Move the decade over there. All right, so let's try it. Let's see if we can find some one-hit wonders or something like that. So there's the 1970s. We'll choose 1975, and we're looking for someone who has just a single dot. All right, so here we'll keep going. So right there, Shaun Cassidy. Shaun Cassidy had hits in just 2 years and then wasn't on the chart anywhere else during the entire 120-year thing. Now, one of the downsides of this Sparkline, based on the pivot table, is there's really no good way to drill down. Now, you and I, because we created this, know that the pivot table is still down below, so we could cruise down there, find Shaun Cassidy, go over to the 54, and double-click to create a report. All right, there we go. He had 3 songs, 22 weeks with To Do Run Run, Hey Deanie for 8 weeks, and That's Rock and Roll for 24 weeks, and we can see the detail behind. It would be, it would certainly be cooler if we could do that in the Sparklines, but we can't. All right, so we're just about done. A couple of things here just to make it look less like Excel. Hide the formula bar, hide the headings, hide the grid lines. Maybe we'll select all cells and apply some sort of a nice light background there. If we go into Excel options, we could actually get rid of the sheet tabs and the scroll bar to hide those. But interesting little analysis. And while this is theoretically built on Power Pivot, I mean, it's built on Power Pivot, but what, 80% of the video is talking about just things that we do in this presentation layer after the fact to make things look good. And in fact, you never even see the pivot table on the screen. All right, well, hey, I want to thank you for stopping by. We'll see you next time for another netcast. Mr. Excel.
MrExcel.com.